Dan, here we are in the man cave on a Sunday. I would imagine that most of the people who watch this channel will have observed the Remembrance Day services or the 2 minute silence today in your own way. Possibly you did it on your own just at 11 o'clock, or at your local cenotaph, or you watched the coverage of the services in London on the cenotaph. Either or, a very important time of the year to remember the people who've given their lives and served for this country. And with that in mind, I just picked up a few little items yesterday. These Australian pennies got me thinking. It's not strictly about Remembrance Day. It's more to do with the Australian Gallipoli Anzac Day thing. And my experience of going to the War Memorial, that's really it. But, it ties in with, servicemen and women giving up their lives, I suppose, and serving the country, basically. So I was going to do 3 or 4 videos there. I got behind with myself. So what I'll first off do is I'll talk you through what is what. It might be a longish video, but first of all, for those of you who know me, you might think I'm full of crap, but there's me Aussie passport. I am an Australian citizen. Only used this once though, or twice, whatever it was. We haven't renewed it, and the reason for that was my wife's got one as well, and we were going back to Australia only for a visit, but then there was big bushfires, COVID, everything else, and we put it on the back burner. And renewing an Australian passport in the United Kingdom is a lot of money. I can't remember exactly how it is, but it's hundreds and hundreds of pounds. Now you might say, well, why didn't you just go over on a holiday visa? I can't. If you're an Australian citizen, you must enter the country on an Australian passport. So if I'm going back to Australia to visit family or friends, bip, bip, there you go. A lot of money. But at the moment, I've just kept that. Obviously, we'll keep it as a keepsake at the minute. So anyway, so I obviously lived out there 3 times, and the Australians do take their patriotism and the history of the country's military careers, history very seriously. And Anzac Day, Remembrance Day is remembered in Australia, and I have been on several Anzac Day remembrance services, and what they do is it is the 25th of April every year, and it is remembering the landers on the Gallipoli Peninsula in 1915. So they have a dawn service, the bugles played, and then what happens is if you want to, which I used to with my uncle, I would go to the local RSL, which is this little badge here. Some of this stuff I collected in Australia, some I didn't. So that's a return services badge for Sydney, RSL. It is a bit like the Royal Legion, British Legion, but they serve food, beer, etc., etc., etc. And I think it's quite, I don't know if the British Legion still be, the return service is still a big thing now. They have little museums inside them. I've never been a British Legion, but I've been in a lot of RSLs, and basically after the service, you can go in there for a gold coin donation, so usually $1 or $2, you can have a fried breakfast or a sausage and eggs and stuff, and a tot of whiskey. And believe me, like my uncle likes a beer, and I do, and I have had a few Anzac days where probably I had too much of that and not enough of remembrance, if you know what I mean. But a good way of doing it, I suppose. So, and this is something that my friend, my close friend in Australia, how we doing, mate? I'll forward him this video. He brought it back for me. It's called Two Up. And now Two Up is a game. I've got a couple of notes. I do know what it is. I'm just making sure I get it right. So you've got the 2 old pre-decimal coined Australian pennies. I think they're very stylish, mate. You've got the Commonwealth Star, kangaroo. The other side, the obverse has got the King George VI head on it. So 2 Up, the wooden thing is called a kip. And 39 pennies were easier to see, apparently, because of the design. I'm not sure what the difference is between that. However, nowadays, usually there's a white cross painted on the tail side, and it dates back to the early days of Australia, and it was played by English and Irish descendants, usually poorer people. Two, it was played extensively by the Aussies in World War One, and I'm almost certain it's illegal, apart from Anzac Day. There is other exceptions because people bet on it. I can't remember exactly how it goes, but basically, you could flip this up, and what's the odds? Two tails, two heads. You bet on it, something along them lines. I never played it, but when you were in these RSLs early on the morning, you would see guys flipping them up, and they land on the floor. So there you go. That's two up. I'll probably do the pennies. I was going to try and spread this video out, but I think I'll just do a big one, and we're all done. So the pennies, yesterday, I bought these at Tynemouth Market. I went to Tynemouth Market. Quite good. There was a lot of stuff there. A lot of expensive military, to be fair. Some of it was a bit pricey. But see that night, they're all World War II dated pennies that I picked up, and got them for £1 for the 4. So you can see just above the kangaroo's tail there's a KG. You've got penny on the back. You've got the king's head. I'm looking for one with the little dot after the kangaroo. No, it's not that one. It must be this one. Sorry, I'm off camera. I haven't got the dot. Look for one with a dot. Somebody. Well, I know 2 of these have got dots on them. I know they have because I've seen them. Yeah, that one has there. You're probably not going to pick it up. But after the penny, if there's a dot after the penny, right, okay, after the word penny, you have to look at the jeweller's loop. That means it was minted in Perth, in Western Australia. If underneath the king's head there's an eye, that means it was minted in India. If there is a PL, is it after penny? I'm just having a look at my little notes. After the penny word, that means it was minted in London, and they're only 1951 ones. If there's no marks on, no penny, no PLs, no nothing, or if there's a K under the KG as well, if there's a dot, that's Perth. It means they were minted in Melbourne. So 2 of these are Melbourne, 2 of these are Perth, and this one here, a 1945 one, which I already had. I can't. I'm looking. It's around the camera. It's being shined up. I think I don't know if I cleaned that, to be honest. I'm probably going to leave the patina on it. That's Melbourne. And this one could be Melbourne. Not sure. My other friend, I've got a couple of mates out in Australia. He brought me this, and this is it's a bottle opener. But unfortunately, the metal things fell out of it. But the penny is glued into a piece of, I believe, jarrah wood. And jarrah is a hardwood in Australia and very popular for putting floors down, doing floors and stuff. So, yeah, so there's the pennies, Australian pennies, my Australian passport, which will move over there, me 2 up. I finally got I thought it was a cap badge. I bought it on eBay, very cheap, but it's not. I believe it's a collar dog. Really cheap. It was a bit covered in verdigris. I soaked it in vinegar, so that's come up okay. I did have somewhere a little sort of stick pin from Anzac Day. I went to a few Anzac Days. Can't find it. Don't know where that is. It fell on the back of somewhere. There you go. RSL. And the RSLs, if you ever go to Australia, I can highly recommend going to them. So the pennies, I'll go back to them before we move on. So, as I said, I got 2 from Perth, 2 from Melbourne. And it was originally the penny, the whole Australian currency system was fixed to the UK pound. And 1943, which these ones are 2 of them, was 53,188,400 made. 1944, 29,942,000. Didn't get the 1945. Forgotten that other one on the 2 ups, 1951. So they were first minted in 1911. Last one 1964. Australia went decimal before UK 1966. So it's the kangaroo and the Commonwealth Star on one side and the King's head on the other side. So that's it with the pennies. I also got this. I think I got this one in Australia, actually, to be fair. I can't remember. No, that is a cap badge. You can see the size, the different size in that. And this will probably be off a slouch hat, the Aussies wore. You know the ones I'm on about. Unsure if it's a period period cigarette case because it's an aristocrat chromium plated made in England, whether that's an Australian one, but it is a nice piece, and I keep little bits of this and that in there. So that. So back to the sort of memorial side of it. In 1991, when I was living with my auntie and uncle, I visited the Australian War Memorial from the First World War to the present day. And as you can see, 1941, 1991, 50 years anniversary. So I've had that all this time. Now, it's a really well-travelled booklet, that, because I stuck it in my backpack, came back from Australia in 92, I was in the country 6 or 7 months, I went back, I put that in a container ship thing, it got shipped across in a boat, quick turnaround because I was only there a few months, and it came back with me. So then it went into storage for a year when me and Mrs. Stan were looking to go back, and then it got on a ship and it went all the way back, and it came in a ship and all the way. So there's probably about 2.5 years of this thing being in my life. It hasn't been in my possession. It's either been in storage or on a container ship, which is strange. So just having a little look at my notes. I do apologise, but sometimes you have to do that. So the Australian War Memorial. I'll go back to Anzac Day actually first. So the Australian New Zealand Army Corps. So the Anzac Day is a remembrance of the service personnel who served in the wars and conflicts. And the Australian War Memorial was mooted after the First World War. It started to get planned in the 1930s. The Great Depression came and it was put on hold, and it opened in 1941, I believe. So I went there with my auntie on the bus, and I've been 2 or 3 times since. So this is something here too. The Australian War Memorial, Canberra, was opened the 11th of November 1941, but the history of the memorial stretches back much further than 1941. When and where did the idea for the memorial originate? In 1916, on the battlefield of Pozières in northern France, Charles Bean, Australian official historian of the First World War, was shocked by the loss of Australian lives on the Western Front. He was determined to ensure that they had suffered and achieved would not be forgotten. Bean had a unique inspiration: the creation of a memorial museum that would display relics collected by the soldiers themselves. Central to Bean's concept was the idea of a roll of honour, listing all Australians who died as a result of the service. So I'm not going to go through all of that, but this nice little piece inside, well, I mean, it's 80 years now, isn't it? So that'll just give you if you want to freeze frame it, you can do that. I say it's in perfect condition because it's just been sat on a bookshelf or in a container ship. So there is obviously a roll of honour there, a hall of memory. There is a tomb of the unknown Australian soldier as well. I believe that was only in the 90s that came. So we'll just have a little flick through. And I believe it obviously has changed. I haven't been there for 14 years now. But it's a nice little thing to keep when you're a collector like I am. And there's what Charles Bean said. What these men did, nothing can alter now. The good and the bad, the greatness and smallness of their story will stand. Whatever of glory it contains, nothing can lessen. It rises as it will always rise, above the mists of ages. A monument to great-hearted men, and for their nation, a possession forever. So it is said that the Gallipoli was like a birth of a nation sort of thing for the Australia and New Zealand, Australians mainly, that was them, and the Australian New Zealanders sort of realising their independence from the colony of the United, being a colony. Obviously they already had become an independent nation, but it was almost their first engagement as a single nation, I believe. So yeah, confirming themselves. So there you go, construction. Oh, here we go. Commonwealth government announces decision to proceed with the construction of a permanent memorial. An inception stone is laid on the site, but work was delayed by the Great Depression. So you can read all that. Now, some of the gold's come off there. It's probably because it's sat on my bookshelf and it's crushed by other books. So a little read through the highlights, I suppose, of the place. I should have looked up this little bit, but I forgot. There is a Japanese midget submarine outside, and when I first went there, I thought it'd be like the X-Craft, a small thing, and it's not at all. It's smaller than a standard submarine, but a quite large thing. And that was an attack on Sydney Harbour by the Japanese in World War II. And there is a naval base in the harbour, and they lined up. I'm not sure what ship it was. They were going to torpedo it, and it might have been the Manly ferry. One of the ferries got in the way, and they hit that by mistake. And I think there was 3 submarines, and they were all captured or destroyed, caught. And this one's been cut into sections. Quite an interesting thing. So, as I said, the Australian tomb of the unknown soldier is there. When you come outside, we just outside. I did have a photograph, but I wasn't going through all my photographs to find it, just to see someone with Rick Astley hair stood outside the War Memorial, aka me, in 1991 with a bum bag. But you look straight down into the Parliament in Canberra in Australia. They do have G for George, which is an Avro Lancaster bomber. It did 90 sorties over Europe. It flew with the Royal Australian Air Force during World War II. And when it had finished its tour of duty, 1944, it was flown back to Australia by an all-Australian crew and used to raise war bonds. It is on display with a German 88mm flak gun and a Bf-109 fighter. From memory, the Bf-109 Messerschmitt is an original paint. I'm sure they said it was the only one in the world. And basically, they've got the Lancaster in the air, and the 109 coming out at an angle, and do like a floor show. Lights come on, and you hear the bomber pilot going now, that sort of carry on, and then you hear the German airman giving his spiel. Probably I'm not too much into that sort of thing, but I suppose it keeps younger people interested. But yeah, I've seen that. The history of Gallipoli is shown there, and I'd just like to read through the statistics, because people maybe only know Gallipoli from maybe the movie. But the British Empire, so that is that's excluding the Commonwealth, Australia and New Zealand. The British Empire lost 31,389 killed. France lost 9,000 killed. Australia 8,709 killed. New Zealand lost 3,431 killed. And the Ottoman Empire, that's the Turks, they lost 56,643. Now, one of the things that comes out of the Gallipoli campaign, again, as I said, is the sort of putting their mark in the ground of a nation, and a nation being born and fighting for its own thing, if that makes sense. I can't quite get the words out, but one of the famous icons, if you like, of the Aussie Anzac spirit, Anzac grit, giving it a fair go, was a fellow called John Kirkpatrick, also known as John Simpson, Simpson's donkey. And he is a legend in all things Anzac in Australia. And I say Australians can be fiercely patriotic, and I think that's a great thing. And one of my cousin's friends in particular, he sort of was taken aback when I told him the history of John Kirkpatrick Simpson, because he wasn't Australian. And I'll read on what he was. There is memorials to John Simpson around Australia. So he was in the field ambulance corps of the Anzacs, and he used donkeys to aid and carry wounded soldiers down to the beach. He did this for 3 weeks, I think, but he was killed by machine gun fire. I believe he used several different donkeys, but the one he used all the time, or the one he used the most, was called Duffy, I believe. And he was born in Tyne Dock in South Shields, which is half an hour up the road from here. So in 1909, around that, he was in the Territorial Army, and then he was in the Merchant Navy in Britain. And in May 1910, he jumped ship in New South Wales. So he did numerous jobs throughout the 3 or 4 years he was in Australia. He was probably in Australia a little bit less than I was, to be fair. In Australia, worked in a mine, etc., etc. He worked on coastal ships, and then he joined the Australian Imperial Force, the Australian Army, after the outbreak of war, and he enlisted as John Simpson, possibly because he didn't want to get out that he'd jump ship, and he the idea is that he was trying to get back home to Britain, and that was the reason why he joined the Australian Army. That is written on an online source, but unfortunately for him, he ended up in Gallipoli, where he performed heroic duties, and is an Australian legend. But there is a memorial to him in South Shields, and literally just up the road. I knew of his history when I lived in Australia, and this one guy in particular was dead set, as the Aussies say. No, he wasn't. He was Australian. I said, no, he wasn't. He was British. No, he's Australian. And he really got offended. And it wasn't until years later, probably about 3 or 4 years ago, me and Mrs. Stan were up in South Shields, and I played rugby up there. I'd never been in the town. I walked up, and there is a statue to Simpson and his donkey. So whatever his true nationality, British or Australian, he was, as the Aussies say, true blue, and he certainly did his duty. So there's a little bit of, if you ever get yourself to Australia, the Canberra or the Australian War Memorial is well worth a visit. And, even though I don't live in Australia anymore, and even though I've only just short of 5 years of my life out there, I still took it very seriously when me and Mrs. Stan got our citizenship, because it did mean something to me. Hopefully one day I will go back there again for a visit, who knows, for how long. But it's been a very important part of my life, and I'm glad to have had the experience. So this is Stan, and that's my Remembrance Day Sunday video about the Australian War Memorial and my very small collection of Australian militaria and bits of this and bits of that. So this is Stan, and I will, of course, see you.